Just to briefly recap events of the past few days, I thought it'd be good to kind of catch up here after the weekend. On Friday, I think you all know, we successfully secured the release of 2 Americans that had been taken hostage by Hamas during the horrific terrorist assault on the 7th of October. And the president had the chance to speak with them and with their families. As he told other families that he met in Tel Aviv, family members of others who have been taken hostage. We have no higher priority than the safety of Americans that are being held around the world, and we're going to continue around the clock to see if we can get them home with their families where they belong. It is literally an hour-by-hour effort here at the White House and at the State Department to find out where these folks are and to try to make the effort to get them out and get them back. As Karine just spoke about, of course, first convoys over the weekend of humanitarian assistance across that border, and was able to reach Palestinians in need, and as she also said, we're going to continue those efforts going forward. It's important that the aid be sustainable, and that's what we're focused on. And of course, throughout the weekend, the President received briefings from his national security team on all the latest developments. And yesterday, as you know, he convened calls with Prime Minister Netanyahu, His Holiness, Pope Francis, and then, of course, with the leaders of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom. I'm sure you all saw the joint statement from all those leaders that they released last night. I won't reiterate it, but you can hopefully take away from that a real clear consistency and unanimity for Israel's right to defend itself against terrorism, while, of course, adhering to international humanitarian law, including the protection of civilians. Now, we've also seen over the course of the last few days, actually the course of the last week, but certainly over the last couple of days of the weekend, an uptick in rocket and drone attacks by Iranian-backed proxy groups against military bases housing U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria. And we're deeply concerned about the potential for any significant escalation of these attacks in the days ahead. At the direction of President Biden, the Secretary of Defense has ordered the military to take steps to prepare for this, to ensure that we're postured appropriately, both in terms of being able to defend our forces and respond decisively as needed. The Secretary of Defense has directed 2 carrier strike groups to the region, and we are now sending more air defenses to U.S. air bases in the region. Now, we know these groups are supported by the IRGC and the regime. We know Iran continues to support Hamas and Hezbollah. And we know that Iran is closely monitoring these events, and in some cases actively facilitating these attacks and spurring on others who may want to exploit the conflict for their own good or for that of Iran. We know Iran's goal is to maintain some level of deniability here, but we're not going to allow them to do that. We also are not going to allow any threat to our interest in the region to go unchallenged. We demonstrated last week that we have and will use the military capables available to us to protect and defend those interests. And those capabilities are getting bigger and better every day. As President Biden has said, our message to any hostile actor seeking to escalate or widen this conflict is very simple. Don't do it. With that, we'll take some questions.
John, is it your view that the Israelis should begin their Gaza offensive whenever they feel ready?
It's our view that the Israeli Defense Forces, Steve, need to decide for themselves how they're going to conduct operations. We're not in the business of dictating terms to them, and we're certainly not going to be in the business here from the White House of previewing any future operations one way or the other. That would be inappropriate.
And then secondly, you said that Iran is actively facilitating these attacks. What are you seeing? What exactly are they doing?
Oh, their support for these Iran-backed proxies is no secret. It's pretty open, and they've made no secret of it. Funding, resourcing in terms of providing the rockets and the munitions that they fire, training for some of these guys. I mean, there is a connection between these groups and the IRGC, a very direct connection.
We have reported that the administration has been urging Israel to delay a ground invasion. Can you tell us whether other countries are making the same request? Is there a coordinated effort on that front?
MJ, I won't speak for other nations and what communications they might be having with Israel. I can tell you we have, since the beginning of the conflict, in the early hours, maintained a level of communication with our Israeli counterparts to ascertain their intentions, their strategy, their aims, to see what their answers are to the kinds of tough questions that any military ought to be asking before you launch any kind of a major operation. Have you thought through the branches? Have you thought through the sequels? Have you thought through the unintended consequences? And so we are in active conversation with them about that.
And John, we've seen a number of leaders travel to Israel or commit to traveling to Israel, of course, the president himself. Is it your understanding that there would not be a ground invasion as long as there's a head of state in the country?
That is a question for Israeli officials to speak to, MJ. Again, I just don't want to be in the position where I am speaking for the Israeli Defense Forces.
And just another quick topic. Why is it that people currently are not able to leave Gaza right now? Do you have sort of an explanation as to why that humanitarian corridor for people to exit Gaza, why that isn't open? Is the obstacle Hamas? Is it the Egyptians?
I think there's a lot of factors going into why there's no exit out. We're glad that stuff's going in, as Kareem briefed y'all, but we still want to see safe passage out, and particularly for the several hundred American citizens that we know are in Gaza and want to leave. And Ambassador Satterfield is on the ground working this very, very hard. But there's a number of factors, and I think security, certainly Egyptian officials have spoken to this. I mean, there's they've got legitimate security concerns, and again, we just need to work through that.
Admiral, can you tell us the latest on the status of hostages and the work to try to release additional hostages? Do you see a category of those being held who might be sort of the next available to be released if that were to take place? Can you give us a sense of what that picture looks like?
I wish I could, Kelly. I really do. And these are all great questions, but unfortunately where we are right now in the process makes it impossible for us to publicly detail the efforts that are going on. We are grateful for all the help we got, and we got help getting those two Americans out, the mother and daughter, and we're glad that they're okay and they're going to be reunited with the families and come back home. But there's a bunch of others that aren't. Now, a small group we still think are Americans, and then there are dozens and dozens from other countries, and obviously Israel as well. And there's just a lot of effort going on, a lot of conversations and discussions with partners in the region, and I think it's just best if we don't detail that.
Do we have more specificity on the number of Americans? It's floated from a handful to as many as 10. Anything more on that?
I want to be careful here because the numbers, as you rightly said, have fluctuated since the last time I talked to you. Certainly now we're glad to know that the number is down by 2, obviously. But we still have about 10 unaccounted for Americans, and it's not exactly clear to us where those 10 people are. So I would still categorize it as about a handful. And I know that's not the specificity you want, but that's really as detailed as I think I should get today.
One last issue. There's a dual national from Maryland, young man who went to serve in the IDF, who was killed in action. Can you speak to that situation, if the president has reached the family or has any intention to do that? Any particulars there?
Well, we certainly offer our deepest condolences to the family. That's news no mom and dad ever want to get. I don't have any communication to speak to one way or the other, but again, our thoughts and prayers go to the family, sure.